Okay. So I thought to spend a little bit of time today on this concept of woke and being woke, and also how it might lead to cancel, as in cancel culture. So there's a lot in the media about that, especially on social media. But if we're not on social media, if we just read the newspaper, there are articles about what it is to be woke and the impact that that has on politics. I don't want to talk about the politics of it, though we can't help but touch on it. And I hope to do so in a way that will not denigrate or criticize either side of the debate about what it means to be woke. Okay, so I just want us to understand these concepts in case we don't understand them already, and to understand them also from a Jewish perspective. Is it Jewish to be woke? And is it Jewish to engage in cancel culture? Okay, so I want to share my screen, and I'm going to do this a couple of times. And first share to this definition from Merriam-Webster dictionary. So I could pull the dictionary off my shelf. I have the Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary just a couple of inches away from my hand. But I would imagine what we have in mind today is not in that New Collegiate Dictionary, which was when I was in college. So I don't think that's there, but Merriam-Webster Dictionary is available online for free, as you see, but there are ads on it, and an ad might appear in a little bit. So I just want to maybe make this bigger if I can. No, it's about as big as we're going to get it. So woke, from U.S. slang, Merriam-Webster suggests, being woke means to be aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial social justice. Okay, so I think that's a great definition, that no matter what political slant you agree with, that's what it means to be woke. That is, someone who is aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. Okay, so that's what it means to be woke, to be more aware of that. Now, and here's an ad that comes up, and I'm sorry about that. I can't make the ads go away. The dictionary goes on here. Often used in contexts that suggest someone's expressed beliefs about such matters are not backed with genuine concern or action. In other words, sometimes people can be criticized about being woke or not being woke, or not being woke enough. Okay, so that one could be aware of social justice issues. One can be aware that that racism is prevalent in society. So being aware could make one woke, but I believe woke would mean that you need to act on it. So someone who is woke usually acts on their sensitivity to social justice issues, and one who isn't acting on it is not being woke enough. Okay, so it also, there's using woke in a disapproving way, politically liberal, as in matters of racial and social justice, especially in a way that is considered unreasonable or extreme. So in other words, the dictionary is highlighting that woke can be used as a pejorative of people on one side insulting those who are woke. So, as in this quote, and I can't verify this quote, I don't know who Shadi Hamid is, but this is Merriam-Webster using this quote: "The National Conservatives view today's liberals as woke cultural warriors who pose an existential threat to the nation and its traditions." So, meaning that it can, as an insult, conservatives on the political spectrum might see people who are woke as threatening conservative viewpoints of social values and social justice issues. So in other words, a political conservative could see someone who is woke as someone who not only has a different perspective on a particular issue, but that woke person could threaten or the people who are woke in society might threaten those who have a more conservative take on those same values. Okay, so that's as political as I'll get about it. So that's what being woke is. So I want to share just 1 second before. Yes, Saul, go ahead.
Yeah, that's not what I understood it to be. And I've never seen those definitions.
Yeah.
I thought it occurred after the George Floyd incident, in which all these people were finally awake due to that, and all of a sudden they're becoming real liberal and they're giving in things that they never did before. That's what I thought it was.
Right. So it's possible that the term became more popular after the George Floyd incident, but apparently the woke, what I'm about to share the next thing, but I have to just get it first. Yeah, the next thing is from an article from Bloomberg News Service. So let me share my screen again, and this provides a little bit of historical context for this. So again, I apologize for the ads on the page. There's nothing I can do about that. So this was written December 31st, so just a couple months ago, by Stephen Carter. Who's Stephen Carter? Stephen Carter is right here, is a Bloomberg opinion columnist. He's a professor of law at Yale University and was a clerk to Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. Okay, and he's also an author of fiction and nonfiction. Okay, so this is what he has to say, whether you agree. I can't speak to Bloomberg as opposed to Bloomberg's political perspective. Is it conservative? Is it liberal? I don't know. I can't speak to Stephen Carter either, but for our purposes, this article is important to give a perspective on where woke came from. So dictionaries tell us that woke refers to a sensitivity to injustice, racial and otherwise, right? Which we just saw. This definition is incomplete. Right, so woke is often so this definition, yes, what divides the woke from the unwoke is often the tough question of what constitutes injustice, but experience suggests that the dividing line is more often about the appropriate response once injustice is spotted. Like so many words we twist to political advantage, patriotism, un-American, woke possesses a daunting fluidity. What the word encompassed yesterday will be enlarged when tomorrow dawns. Depending on where you sit, this aspect may be a feature or a bug. For the wordsmith, it represents an irresistible challenge. Okay, so he says the term can go back to a New York Times Magazine article in 1962 by William Melvin Kelly, who traced the term woke back to a 1940 quotation from a United Mine Workers official to a 1938 song by Huddie Ledbetter, better known as Lead Belly, in which he advises his listeners to stay woke, lest they run afoul of white authority. So the term woke was used in the African American community to be aware of woke being equals being aware of the threat of the white people on blacks, right? In a time of racial discrimination, way before the civil rights movement, way before segregation was being done away with. So black people had to be woke to the threats of white people. Okay, so that's where the term comes from. Okay, so that's all I wanted to share about this. That the term woke has it originated in the black community, and then it has been recently adopted by anyone who, but it tends to be more for people in with a more liberal bent politically, to say that they're woke, that they are aware of issues. Okay, so that's just in general. Again, I don't want to get into all the politics of it and how what social media has done with it, but that's what the background of the term woke is, and the background of what it is today. So clearly, from a Jewish perspective, Jews are supposed to be woke. Okay, just based on these definitions from the Merriam-Webster website and also from Stephen Carter's article in Bloomberg. There's tons of other articles out there you can read, but just based on what woke means, being Jewish means to be woke. Okay, so that's it is clear that when the Torah says 36 times to be sensitive to the stranger in your midst, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt, it is clear that we're supposed to be woke to the strangers. Okay, to take care of the widow and the orphan in the community is to be woke to poverty in society. Okay, so those just two of many social justice issues. Don't stand idly by, right? Al ta'amod al dam reyecha, chapter 19 of Leviticus says in this holiness code, as it's called, chapters 19 and 20. Don't stand on the blood of your neighbor means don't stand idly by to any kind of crisis that is occurring. That if the life of somebody else is threatened, if the health and safety of somebody else is threatened, if justice is not being imparted equally, don't stand idly by. So clearly, Judaism teaches us to be woke. Okay, so there's really, and if I only wanted to speak about woke, that would be the end. Very short and sweet. Not much else to say about it. What complicates this is how woke then can lead to what has become known as cancel culture. Okay, so being woke, being aware of social justice issues, being aware of the downtrodden being aware of racism and hatred could lead one then to be part of what is called cancel culture. And that's the bigger question, whether it's Jewishly appropriate to be part of cancel culture. Okay, so what is cancel culture? Let me get my share screen ready for that. Okay, and let's do that. Okay, so this is from Vox. I didn't have enough time to research who Vox is. I've heard about it. It's one of these online, media outlets, source for news. So I can't say right now whether Vox is liberal or conservative or middle of the road. But what is cancel culture? That's all I want to look about this. So this was edited. This was 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So within the turbulent past few years, the idea that a person can be canceled, in other words, culturally blocked from having a prominent public platform or career, has become a polarizing topic of debate. The rise of cancel culture and the idea of canceling someone coincides with a familiar pattern. A celebrity or other public figure does or says something offensive. A public backlash, often fueled by politically progressive social media, ensues. Then come the calls to cancel. That could be a political statement, but yes, the calls for people being canceled usually come from the liberal section of society, canceling someone who has said something that goes against liberal values. Okay, then come the calls, goes against liberal values. So conservatives usually argue with liberals about canceling someone for their opinion that that does not subscribe to a liberal perspective. Okay, so just one more. Then come the calls to cancel the person, that is to effectively end their career or revoke their cultural cachet, whether through boycotts of their work or disciplinary action from an employer. So to many people, this process of publicly calling for accountability and boycotting, if nothing else seems to work, has become an important tool of social justice, a way of combating through collective action some of the huge power imbalances that often exist between public figures with far-reaching platforms and audiences and the people and communities their words and action may harm. So cancel culture could have a good reason behind it. So, for example, Kyrie Irving, right, the basketball player, just a couple of months ago, was promoted on his social media site, whether it was on Instagram or his Twitter account, some anti-Semitic film that he suggested people watch. People were in uproar. Who's Kyrie Irving to do this? How could he be promoting something anti-Semitic? And if somebody like Kyrie Irving, who has lots of followers, that's what it means in social media today, the more public figure you are, if you have a Twitter account, the more popular your Twitter account is. And the more popular it is, that means the more people are reading it. Okay? Gone are the days where a television show is the most popular way to be seen by people. It's not television anymore. It's not being on the news. It's whether you have a Twitter feed that has millions of people following you. So former President Trump has one of the most popular Twitter feeds in the Twitter universe. All right, so if he says something or tweets something, then people know it immediately. And so then people of that influence, of celebrities, have a large following in the Twitter universe. And if they're on Twitter, they also are usually on Instagram. And that's the other way for people to be popular. So if they're promoting something related to politics or related to social justice, you know, if it's a good cause, let's say Kyrie Irving was asking people to donate to a particular charity, or, you know, or rescue dogs or something like that, nobody would argue with him. And maybe animal shelters would have had a run of people because everybody's following Kyrie Irving. But because he said something or promoted an anti-Semitic film, then the cancel culture came out and said that he needed to be canceled. Okay, so, or Kanye West at the same time promoted something similar. So that what Kanye West has is a line. So he's for those who don't know, he's a rap singer, okay, and a very wealthy person. And not just is he an artist, he's also has a fashion line. So there's a shoe that people like to buy, the Kanye shoe, and let's say it's made by Nike. I don't remember offhand. So then the cancel culture goes so far as to say that the company that runs the Kanye shoe decided to cancel production of the Kanye shoe. All right, so that's the extent of how far cancel culture can go. Cancel culture can also go with what's happening with the Confederacy. Okay, street names in our area, especially, right? In Virginia, where there are schools and roads named after Confederate Army, Confederate political figures, there's a movement afoot to change those names. So there are schools that have new names now. There are roads like Lee Highway, right? Depending on which jurisdiction it is, Lee Highway has been changed, and there are other roads like that have been changed. Neighborhoods also that could have been named for some Confederate general, or also statues are being taken down, right? And so in Richmond, Virginia, the capital, they have Monument Row, and Confederate generals have been taken off there. It even goes the opposite way. Okay, so not just about the Confederacy. I remember a couple of years ago that in San Francisco, they decided to change the name of a George Washington school, a school named after George Washington, to take that name off, either as George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, because they owned slaves. Okay, so the cancel culture can go to the very extreme. It could be for a good reason. There could be, you know, the uproar over anti-Semitism could be such that that it was a good thing to cancel Kyrie Irving and to cancel Kanye West. Anti-Semitism people shouldn't have a voice to give a platform for anti-Semitism today. The anti-Semitism being on the rise, anti-Semitic acts, etc., on the rise in this country, around the world. So if cancel culture works to raise awareness of what Kyrie Irving and Kanye West did, to the point where they are punished in some way for their actions, then that theoretically is a good thing. But is it a good thing to take it all the way to blot out something from history to the point where you don't have a street name anymore, you don't have a statue anymore? Okay, you can argue whether that's good or bad to have the statue around, but what about in curriculum, right? So there's a question about cancel culture getting its way into the curriculum, and the cancel culture can go both ways, like what the governor of Florida is attempting to do with curriculum in the Florida schools in a conservative way, right? So to delete things from the curriculum that go against conservative perspective on values. And it can go the other way, like in San Francisco, to plot out George Washington's name or Thomas Jefferson's name from history as well. It's so it gets to a very difficult political perspective here. The question also about the New York Times 1619 project, right? That creates that has that lengthy piece that came out a couple of years ago about 1619 being the year that the first slave was brought into America. So the whole curriculum being written about raising awareness of the how embedded racism is in America, and to raise awareness of it and to bring it to bring it into school curricula across the country, to where in some parts of the country the how embedded racism is not so clear, depending on what part of the country and who's learning about it. And so this is a movement to bring that back. So it's so there are people, the idea of canceling goes both ways. It's usually attached to the liberals, that liberals want to cancel, but it can also, and then conservatives are against the canceling, but then conservatives themselves do some canceling as well. Anything that goes against a conservative perspective, they might be promoting canceling also. Okay, so from a Jewish perspective, there is a little bit of canceling that has happened in our prayer book. Okay, so as society evolves and as perspective on values change, which is natural, it's just as the centuries progress, a perspective about a particular value will progress as well. Okay, so and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's just the nature of society. So it works that way in religion also. Some religions allow evolution to move more quickly than other religions do. And certainly certain denominations within a religion allow the evolution to take place more quickly than others. Okay, so for example, within the conservative movement, this idea of cancel culture, what you want to write out because it doesn't fit with your perspective on what the value should be understood as today, right? So as the conservative movement has adopted more and more the sense of being egalitarian, meaning men and women being equal and treated equally within the religion, participating equally within the religion, then it gets to a point where anything in the prayer book that teaches the opposite of egalitarianism should be changed. So the question then is, you're dealing with something more sacred than just a man-made cultural value, right? So this is dealing with a prayer book, and then or dealing with the Bible is a more difficult question to ask about should cancel culture, the idea of writing something out, how far, what is the red line beyond which, yes, we have to write this out, or until then, we're just not writing it out yet. So let me give you a couple of examples. So with egalitarianism, there's a prayer at the beginning of the service, in the morning service. It's a list of blessings that we say as the preliminary service begins. And we have 3 blessings there that in the traditional prayer book are written in the negative. One prayer is, thank God for not making me a non-Jew. Thank God for not making me a woman. Thank God for not making me a slave. Okay, so those are the 3 that are written in the negative. The conservative movement prayer book, 70 years ago, almost 70 years ago, it was published 1946. So, I'm sorry, my math is wrong. It's 80 years ago, almost 80 years ago, changed it to the positive. So instead of thanking God for not making me a non-Jew, thank God for making me Jewish. So instead of Shelo Asani Goy, it says She'asani Yisrael. Okay, so change the negative to the positive. Instead of who has not made me a slave, Shelo Asani Aved, it now says She'asani Ben Chorin, who has made me free. And instead of Shelo Asani Isha, who has not made me a woman, right? If a woman prays, a woman's supposed to say, who has not made me a woman, but she's a woman. So instead of men saying, who is thanking God for not making me a woman, which in context means thank God for making me obligated for all the commandments, because women are exempt from time-bound commandments. That's what that means. It's not a sexist, men are better than women. It's all about observing commandments. Thank God that I get to observe all 613, whereas women are exempt from a lot of them. But still, it doesn't sound good. Thank God for not making me a woman. So the prayer book 80 years ago says, thank God for Shasani B'Tsalmo, who has created me in God's image, right? So man or woman, thanking God that we're created in God's image. Okay, so the cancel culture, then this idea, the egalitarianism became such an accepted idea within at least the conservative movement denomination, and certainly in all non-Orthodox denominations today, to the point where anything that smacks of non-egalitarianism is written out, or at least rewritten. So we haven't omitted that prayer from the prayer book, we've just changed the wording. And also with the Amida. So right now our policy is that if the cantor or I am leading the service, then we include Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah's names in the beginning of the Amida, right? So Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. So we add that, all right, just to be sure that we're teaching in our prayers the value of egalitarianism and the value that both men and women have and have contributed to Jewish culture over the centuries, okay? So that's egalitarianism, where the sense of being woke to the idea of egalitarianism leads to action, which is to rewrite the prayers. Okay? Now, what about cancel culture? So like if you want to write out somebody from history because what they did was so atrocious, right? So you write out the Confederate generals, because keeping a Confederate general statue in the public square of your town promotes the idea of the Confederacy. Keeping the Confederate flag as part of the symbol, as part of your state flag, promotes the particular value, right? So some states, some southern states, finally have taken the Confederate flag out of their state flag symbol, right? So the Confederacy and the ideas behind the Confederacy are understood by society to be so bad that you write it out of the public displays and the public ways that usually are there to maintain the values, right? So doesn't mean that we don't teach about the Civil War. It just means that we're not going to promote the figures from the Civil War in the way that others are promoted. Okay, so as the victors write the history books, right? So it's here when it comes to the particular values, Confederacy versus the Union, right? So which values do we want to keep promoting in America at large? So to make this Jewish, you know, is there a point in which we say that people who have transgressed Jewish law should be written out of the prayer book or be written out of the Bible? All right, so two examples. So Amalek, we just had Purim last week, right? And the Shabbat before Purim, we remember about the war waged between the nation of Amalek and the people of Israel 3 days after they crossed the sea, after leaving Egypt. And Amalek is remembered in the Torah for attacking the Israelites from behind. And in a normal way of people marching, the strong people go first, they blaze the trail, and you have the older and the more infirm and the children in the back. Okay, so the Amalekites attack from the back. And we're told we're supposed to blot out the memory of Amalek. Don't forget to do that. Okay, so the irony of that is an event that happened 3,000 years ago, supposedly in the Torah, commanded by God to blot them out. We continue to remember them. Right, so the ultimate cancel from God to say, cancel the Amalekites. So if anybody says to cancel anything, if God says to cancel it, we should cancel it, but we don't cancel it. Because by remembering it and reminding us of the story and telling the story every year on the Shabbat before Purim, and then having the holiday of Purim of Haman being descended from the Amalekites according to tradition, we're not only not doing the commandment, we're doing the opposite of the commandment. We're remembering. We're not canceling, we're keeping it in. So that's just the irony of the cancel culture that's there for the Amalekites, that we don't in the end cancel. What we're canceling though is the values the Amalekites represent. That is, don't allow Amalekite values to seep into your own Israelite Jewish values. That's what we have to keep at bay. Okay, and that, for the most part, we've been successful. The other part of cancel culture, if we're going to cancel anybody, like if San Francisco cancels George Washington and Thomas Jefferson because they were slave owners, okay, but they were the first and third presidents of the United States. And you can argue they did great things for our country, right? Writing the Declaration of Independence, winning the Revolutionary War. Okay, these are important people. Yes, they did terrible things, but they weren't terrible at their time. They're terrible now, right? It's illegal. Slavery is illegal, but it wasn't illegal in their time. They didn't do anything illegal. So, but because today what they did is so terrible and egregious in our eyes, there's some who say we should be canceling them. So in the Jewish perspective, the same question could be applied to King David. Okay, so King David is understood by Jewish tradition as as the best king in the history of kings of Israel. Okay, there was King Saul, he was first, then it was King David. And King David He was the one, he wanted to build the temple in Jerusalem, but was not allowed by God to do so because he had blood on his hands from expanding the territory of the land of Israel. And tradition says he wrote the 150 Psalms. But the Bible clearly says that the Bible clearly says, just distracted here by, and this is the reason why we're on mute. Okay, so the Bible says that King David was an adulterer, right? So he saw Bathsheba on the rooftop of a neighboring building, and he fell in love with her, right? It was an erotic scene, Bathsheba bathing on the roof of the building, and King David lusting after her and wants her. And so she's married. And so because he's king, he's able to send her husband off to the front lines of the battle, knowing that he'll be killed. And then he marries her. But he has an adulterous relationship with her before her husband is killed. So he commits adultery. That's against one of the 10 commandments. And he kills her husband, which is also one of the 10 commandments. So that he murders it, not directly. He's not the one who pulled the sword, but he put him in such a place that he was murdered. So for those two things, you would think that King David should be punished and written out of Jewish history, but he's not. Okay, so somehow the Bible, after the events surrounding Bathsheba, the child of that adulterous relationship dies, and then they have more children, Solomon being another child. So the prophet Nathan just gets into David and saying how terrible a person he was, and David repents. David repents of his actions and his conduct, and for that reason, the story stays in the Bible, and for that reason, the Psalms are in the Bible and in our prayer book. So if cancel culture then were to pervade Judaism regarding King David, it should blot out King David, and it should keep out the Psalms from the prayer book because of that. And so Judaism then is not, in a way, a cancel culture religion. Judaism is more of be fully aware of what the issues are, be educated about them, and then act appropriately. Okay, so rewrite a prayer to include the matriarchs and to promote gender equality, but don't write it out. Understand King David's actions and understand that he was terrible, but he repented. And understand then that all of us are subject to punishment for our actions, but also all of us are able to repent as well. So that's what I wanted to say about woke and cancel today, and what Judaism has to say about it. Anybody? Yes, Saul.
Yeah, I have two,
Yes.
one comment and one question. The comment was, we used to have a member who never attended the summer Deuteronomy Shabbats because that person didn't like where the Jews went into the land and killed everybody.
Okay, that's interesting.
So that's a way of canceling. Yeah,
so he had his personal cancel view. So let me just say that before you ask your question. The reform movement is more of a cancel culture kind of movement, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that they are more willing to cancel things out of the prayer book if it goes against their ideology and values. So for example, the second paragraph of the Shema, which teaches if you do the right thing, you'll be rewarded. The rain will come at the right time. If you do the bad thing, you'll be punished. The rain will come at the wrong time. Because the Reform movement doesn't buy into that theology, they take that out of the prayer book. Because the Reform movement doesn't believe in the resurrection of the dead, they took that out of the prayer book as well, and other examples of that. And they also, because then they can play with the Torah readings, they would do away with those sections of the Torah that are also antithetical to modern ethical values. Yeah. So so I would just say the Reform movement is more of a cancel culture movement that reflects that, and we can take we can personally be our own cancel culture kind of people too. Yeah. And so what's your question?
This is something that I've always wondered. I don't know if it's relevant, but who are the successors of the Amalekites? Because they were not killed, you know.
Right. Well, they like other nations over the centuries, they just disappeared or became assimilated into the bigger society, right? So like what happened to the ancient Egyptians? They just became assimilated into the Roman Empire, the Greeks and Romans who invaded Greece, and the Muslims who came from Arabia into Egypt as well. So to say, like President Nasser said back in the 50s and 60s, that he's a descendant of the pharaohs is historically inaccurate. It's just not. Or Saddam Hussein saying that he's a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire. That's just not the way Iraq is today or Egypt is today. It's just people stay, they become assimilated with other people who come in, and that's just, so there may be the indigenous Arab population of the land of Israel might have, if there's a way to test it, could have partial Amalekite DNA in them. Okay, whereas, if there's a way to test it, like if somehow we could find King Agag's bones of the king of Amalek, who Saul annihilated, if we could find his bones and prove it, then we could do DNA analysis on his bones and find a unique aspect of his genes that would say this is Amalekite, and see if there's any other people around today that have some part of that gene, right? Like the Kohen gene. Anybody who is a Kohen has a slightly has a DNA marker that goes back to the time of Aaron. That's geneticists have proven this, that anybody who's a Kohen has that marker that goes back to Aaron 3,000 years ago. So so that's what happens to ancient cultures that disappear. They become assimilated. Bob, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, you're aware that the school board in San Francisco came to their senses and they did not.
Yes. Yeah. I understand that they didn't go through with it, but the fact that they brought it up just
was stupid.
Okay, that again,
in my opinion,
I brought it up just to show the opposite of knocking down the Confederate generals. Okay, that this is the opposite side of that, the opposite extreme. That's all. Yeah.
What's wrong when you don't like somebody's position, let's say, and they have a commercial brand, that you boycott them?
Right. So that the problem is the power of social media today to allow for something like cancel culture to exist. Okay, so that back in the day before the internet, it was much harder to effectively run a boycott. So, for example, the OPEC back in the 70s, right, forced a boycott of Israel and Israeli products to the point where there were many companies that did not do business in Israel on threat of not being able to get oil. So for the longest time, Japanese cars could not be purchased in Israel. For the longest time, Pepsi was not sold in Israel, only Coca-Cola, because of the Arab boycott. So that boycott essentially was the cancel culture of the 70s. Now, cancel culture can be more pervasive and more random because of the power of social media. Okay, so whether for good or for bad, whether it's justified or not, we could argue whether it's appropriate to buy Kanye West shoes or not, based on his politics, okay, or whether Kyrie Irving should sit out of basketball games because of as punishment for what he says on social media. We could argue whether that's appropriate punishment or not. It just gets to that if Kyrie Irving or Kanye West were in the 70s, there would not have been any kind of cancel culture around them. It would have taken a lot more power, like OPEC, to carry something off like that. So cancel culture is really a modern phenomena based on social media. And Lori has a question here. Does the reform movement delete parts of the Torah in their Chumash, or just not focus on these parts in their services? They don't delete it in the Chumash. There's a reform edition of a commentary. There's a reform Chumash. It doesn't delete the Chumash in any way. It just has interpretations there of how the reform movement understands it, but understands those sections. But there are many Reform synagogues that don't have services on Shabbat morning, so they don't take out the Torah on Shabbat morning. And if they do, then they give a choice to the bar or bat mitzvah as to what section of the Torah they want to do. They also give a choice as to what haftarah they want to chant as well. So there's choice there within the Reform movement of what sections of the Torah you're going to read publicly. So they don't delete it from the Torah. They have the same Torah that we do. It's just that they choose what they'll read from it in public services. Okay, so
I bet they don't read about skin diseases.
Right, exactly. So yes, Tazria and Mitzora would not. It'll be the rare Reform synagogue where a bar bat mitzvah will actually read that portion. That's right. Okay, we'll stop here for today. Yes, Lori, what were you going to say?
Yeah, does cancel culture allow for repentance?
That's interesting. I don't know. I don't know how does somebody Kyrie Irving had to apologize on his social media platforms. Kanye West, I'm not sure, apologized. I don't think he did, but that would be a way of apologizing. You can apologize on your platform, and then it depends on how sincere the apology sounds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry if my words hurt you, as opposed to I'm really sorry. I now understand that my words were hurtful. Those are totally different statements. So do people who say the wrong thing on social media actually have a sincere apology? Or do they say, I'm sorry if my words hurt you? So, so the applying the Jewish understanding of repentance to apologies on social media, that would be an interesting kind of research project to do. All right. Have a good day, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.